So, hello again, everyone. Again, it's been a little while since my last episode. I don't make episodes just for the sake of making episodes. I only make them if I really am inspired to, I guess. I always wait for inspiration or intuition to direct the show, as it were. So, I had a really beautiful little dream with Mike the other day, just the other day on the 8th of February. And that was a Thursday. And I woke up having this dream, being in this dream with him. And the dream was unique because it was so beautiful, so self-contained, like a little vignette, like a little story. And it was very intimate, and I think potentially spiritually quite significant, a significant kind of landmark in our saga. So I just the significance of it kind of dawned on me as the days progressed after it. It was a very beautiful way to wake up that day. And so the rest of that day, Thursday, I did some spiritual things, and I did a lot of writing, not about the dream, but just other kind of writing. And then the following day, Friday the 9th, I wrote a blog piece about this dream because I'd been thinking about it ever since it happened, and I was just thinking, I have to make a blog post about this dream because it was so beautiful and so simple and self-contained and spiritually significant. And so Friday, that's what I did. It took me 5 hours. I did it in one go, just sat down, didn't get up, didn't do anything else, just completely absorbed. And then I tweaked it a little bit the next day, which was yesterday, the 10th. And on my walks, I'd gone out, and you know how you've got the function on the phone where you can have a voice read out your text. I'd been walking around listening to my piece like that, this woman reading out my piece. And then I thought, well, why not just do it for the podcast? And so, well, here we go. So I'll read it out, and if anything strikes me or I need to, elaborate on anything, then I will. So if you want to follow along with the written version, you can go to my website, which is mrmrsjackson.wordpress.com, and click on menu and then blog, and it should be there. And if it's not there, then just go to the homepage and scroll to the bottom of the homepage until you get to the categories. And it's tagged with the categories dreams and spirit marriage. So if you click on those categories, you should find it. And it's called At School. I had the sweetest little dream of Mike yesterday morning, February the 8th, 2024. We were both in school, aged about 10 or 12. Our classroom was fairly large, at least compared to us. The room looked to be from the 1970s or 80s. There were shiny metal ledgers, a long blackboard, pens and crayons, sheets of butcher's paper, and colourful posters. There were also colourful drawings or cards suspended above us on strings. The ceiling was high, and white fluorescent lights hung from it. There was green around, and the carpet was a darker blue-grey. The room was roughly square, but our tables were pushed against one wall, along which the blackboard ran. The other side of the room had more tables pushed against the other wall, leaving a broad aisle down the middle. This classroom did not look like any I had been in my life. The items in it were recognizable, but still it was a new place, and I was aware of the fact in the dream. Upon reflection, it was strange that our tables were pushed up against this blackboard, meaning it ran alongside the students instead of in front of them. However, at the front of the room was a central blackboard that spanned almost the width of the room. In front of it was a teacher's desk with papers on it, and several brown cabinets to the left and right which contained books and other paraphernalia. I was up the front in the first row next to a friend and another student. Mike was in the third row next to the wall and blackboard. He had friends next to him too. There were about 5 tables on our side of the room, and I saw a foyer and white daylight coming through glass walls or windows beyond the last table. White light seen through a glass door and windows also featured in Mike's seminal August 20th, 2022 visitation dream. Mike was his 10 or 12-year-old self, gorgeous and black, wearing a shirt, pants and vest over the top as he did. His hair wasn't in an afro, it was just short. I didn't see his clothes clearly, but I think his pants were brown, his shirt purple and red, and his vest beige with patterns. Everyone was occupied working on something, and there were about 10 other students besides us. I saw no teacher at any time. A tranquility enveloped the place. It was a suspended, out of time, peaceful classroom. Evidently, our project was to present things we'd done in the past, and in my case, it was an absurdist music recording I'd made long ago in 2007 or 8. On the floor near the back of the room, near the glass doors, was a silver boombox tape player from the 70s or 80s, and Mike played this tape of mine. Others were in earshot too, and I was a little embarrassed because the recordings were very exuberant and experimental, and I felt quite exposed. I have these on CD somewhere, and the closest comparison among my released music would be Down at Jemima's. It's a track off my album called I Want to Have Colours in My Blood, which you can find if you go on Spotify or any of those music platforms. Just look up Deanna Jackson, and the album is I Want to Have Colours in My Blood. All of those tracks were recorded actually in 2019, but I re-released it in 2022, with the exception of Auditorium, which was recorded in 2015. Pre-Mike. It's the only track, but I like it so much that I put it on the album. So Down at Jemima's would be the closest to those early crazy a cappella recordings that I did around that time, sort of the mid to late 2000s, when I was hanging around with musicians, experimental musicians, not pop musicians. So even though in this dimension, Mike was thoroughly grown up when I made these recordings, all that mattered in the dream was that I'd made them several years before he came into my life, and he was hearing them for the first time. I remember seeing him crouched down on the floor in front of the tape player, putting my music on, and he was eager and excited. I have this image of that. And he liked them. It was clear to me in the dream that he liked them. This was quite beautiful because he was hearing an intimate part of me that he'd had nothing, at least consciously, to do with. It's like he was going through my pre-Mike life and showing everybody. I was a bit embarrassed, but I could tell he esteemed what he'd found and considered it precious. He was proud of it and of me. Then we were back at our tables working away. At one point, one of his friends got up and came down to the front to greet his girlfriend, who was sitting next to me. I looked back at Mike, who was sitting in his spot next to the wall. I remember his eyes. They were large, staring, sparkling and young, taking everything in. Our eye contact was not intense and unmistakable like in his visitation dreams of November 5, 2018, April 5, 2019, and August 20th, 2022. But I was still somehow aware of his eyes and their character. I also sensed his demeanour, which was curious, observant, serious, steady, and at times cheeky. He didn't move much physically, although I did see him walk around a few times. He spent most of his time sitting quietly and observing. This jives with what I know of his personality. Nobody stares like Mike, and if he's watching something, he's watching. I wanted him to come to me, and he knew that I knew that he knew it. Our eyes met, and I said to him, "Come here." He didn't move straight away, so I said it again. "Come here." He was just kind of staring at me, having a moment of inhibition. His eyes were eager, but his body was tentative, which, again, is him, I think. I don't remember whether I said this out loud or telepathically, but I'm leaning towards the latter because it was effortless. I was half on my chair, kind of swinging on it, completely turned around, facing Mike. There was no teacher to tell me off. I was kind of bossy, which was my personality at that age. I didn't ask him to come to me. I told him to. I was a tomboy and regularly told people what I thought. His walk over to me is steady but tentative, and he's holding something in his hands. I think it's my recording. When he gets to me, he tells me he liked my recording, which thrills me. The energy between us feels beautiful, and he's close to me. I remember his vest. It had brown and cream patterns. He was earnest and sweet. Then he comes even closer until our faces are touching. The vibe between us gets even more intense, and then the next thing I know is we're touching our faces together and moving them from side to side. This feels beautiful, and I can feel our facial features brush against each other in this rhythmic way. Side to side, back and forth, just brushing our faces together as though we're blind and trying to see each other. I feel his eyebrows and they tickle me slightly, and his forehead and skin are so smooth. I feel his eyelashes and his nose. He was so gorgeous at this age, doll-like, and that's what I was experiencing, up extremely close. His movements were very deliberate and controlled, like he'd thought them out priorly. This seems like Mike, at least off stage. I mean, on stage he's still in control of himself, but he can let himself go quite a lot as well, which is beautiful. I can imagine him going through his mother's jewellery carefully and silently planning on gifting his beloved teacher. Mike definitely plans. His consecutive proposals were very considered and deliberate. My wedding ring arrived precisely on our wedding day, which no one else in the world knew about. And of course, no one takes over the world the way he did without intending to. He's a quiet, strategic little fish. And by fish I mean Piscean, his Piscean qualities. Our movement was slow and tender, not fast. Back and forth, side to side, in this meditative and rhythmic way. I felt the hairs of his eyebrows and his smooth skin and his breath. He was doing this steadily and with intention, as though this was just what we were supposed to do then. It was very affectionate and intimate, almost sacred. A sacred, private ritual between this young, serious boy and his girl. This was what was going on when my alarm went off at 7 a.m. I'd only set it because I wanted to message someone early. I didn't have to get up for anything. I wish I hadn't set my alarm. It was such a beautiful way to wake up, and I could have continued our sensory dance far, far longer. There have been other memorable awakenings, like October 27th, 2018, when I was awoken by "You Are Not Alone" blasting in my head, and September the 2nd, 2023, when he kissed me so passionately and held me so tight. Interestingly, I hadn't thought about or seen footage of Mike at this age for a long while. There was one isolated instance a few days ago when I happened to think about how he liked a girl in school but was too inhibited to tell her. I can't remember the context in which this thought arose. I love the apparent randomness of the way he appears in my dreams. I used to think I dreamed of him in a certain way because I'd watched or read something from that same era. But his appearances do seem to follow a logic of their own. He's also responded to specific requests of mine in the past. So, yeah, for a long time I really thought that I was having certain kinds of dreams because I was watching certain things. I thought that my waking experiences were kind of generating my dreams. But, as time went on, I realized that actually they do seem to have a logic of their own. And, of course, because I realized that there's another consciousness involved here, a separate, autonomous consciousness, him. And, he's got agency himself, he's got his own volition, and he does things when he feels that it's the right time to do them, so it's not like for a long time I thought that dreams were in my mind just trying to sort through the day's events or trying to sort through my personality. But when there's another consciousness involved, it's like relating to anyone in this dimension as well. So it was quite something to realize this. I got up and wrote the dream down. Soon after, I realized that we'd essentially been rubbing our third eyes together. I'd never done this with anyone before. I've rubbed noses with people, touched foreheads, stroked their faces, and even with feathers, but nothing like this. It was a new experience for me. I know about our third eye, and just weeks ago, my friend who's married to an angel told me she had a dream in which her husband pressed his forehead against hers, saying it will help with her third eye. So maybe this is what Mike was doing too, stimulating and opening my third eye. Also, my friend met Mike for the first time in her dream in late January. So this friend of mine who's married to an angel, we met in October last year, and since that time, we've pretty much just been communicating back and forth, discussing lots of things. And, well, it was only January that, I think it was the 19th, and she wrote to me and told me that excitedly that she met Mike in her dream last night. And, well, we'll discuss that later, in more detail, but it's just interesting that, we'd been talking for a long while, and then, finally, she meets him. And the other staggering thing that came out in that dream of hers is that her husband and Mike know each other. They know each other. They're acquainted. So, yeah, that was something to come to terms with. But more on that later. I don't like to interpret dreams straight away. I wait for more information so I can assemble a narrative if one emerges. For example, Mike's marriage narrative, I only discerned far into it. I didn't understand his first "Will you be with me?" proposal of 2019 because I had no context for it. And what I mean by that is, at the time, as I've mentioned just before, I ascribed dreams quite little significance. I certainly didn't imagine that in your dreams you could meet like actual people, or whether they're still here or whether they're already crossed over. I didn't know that that this was real, and I didn't know what it meant that a person had asked me to be with them in a dream, because of the way that I thought about dreams, the status that I ascribed to them at the time. So, well, I just wrote it down, of course, and I waited for more information to come along, which did. So, when I told my aforementioned friend about my Burgundy Artemisia experience, which you can read about, I'll put the link below. It's another blog piece on my blog. She interpreted it as Mike showing me parts of his actual life, as in his incarnate life as MJ. 4. The next morning I discovered that something very like my dream had actually taken place in his life. His incarnate life as MJ. So, maybe this was his actual school? Maybe something similar happened? Maybe he wanted it to happen back then. Or even made it happen retrospectively. Maybe it's an ideal experience had we been the same age. It could be all of these. So it's interesting sometimes to wonder about, how things could have been. I don't find it to be very fruitful to do this too much because, in many respects you can't change the past. You have to work with what is, what actually happened. But anyway, a couple of months ago I was just laying in bed. I just woke up and I just started imagining like what it would have been like had we been the same age. What would have that been like? And I think we would have had a really great time even back then, as kids. We're the same people, but I just saw us in a big hall, like just recording music together and singing and drawing and, dancing and watching movies and all the stuff that we love to do still. And I determined that that would have been really, really great for both of us. Really great. And he would have been quite serious about it because I think he's always been very serious and he kind of knows what he wants. But, and I guess, well, it would have been good back then and it's still good now because we're soulmates. So, soulmates, they always kind of end up together in some way, whether they're born at the same time or they're born at slightly different times, depending on what they want to achieve and all these things that I don't know enough about as yet. But they just keep on having different kinds of experiences, but they're always together. They always end up getting together. So yeah, it was just this little I just tried imagining what that would have been like, and sometimes it makes me sad because he spent his whole 50 years essentially on this earth without finding that. So that's really I won't talk about it because I'll get upset about it. So despite this dream not having intense eye contact, and Mike didn't speak to me clearly like in the visitation dreams I mentioned, I do think he was personally present because of certain features of the dream. Nothing about the dream was weird, out of place, or distorted. The environment was realistic. It looked like a normal school from a certain era, and we were doing normal school activities. Mike looked the way he looked when he was a boy, including his clothes, and his behaviour was in character. He found and played a recording on a device appropriate to the era that I'd actually made in my life, and let me know he liked it. I felt the energy between us when he got close, and it felt lovely and powerful. And he performed a specific action that has a known spiritual meaning, stimulation of the third eye, if that's what he was doing. Everything about the dream relates to he and I in a realistic and relevant way. So I'll just linger on the feeling when he got close to me, when we were close to each other. That feeling I felt in the first visitation when he was visiting me for the first time on November the 5th, 2018. And also in the second visitation, which was April the 5th, 2019, in the dream in which he asked me, "Will you be with me?" Because we embraced in both of these dreams. And when he got near me, there was this beautiful, strong feeling of like a bliss mixed with excitement, and like, you know, when you get butterflies in your solar plexus. But also I felt things in my throat and my head, and you know, it's a very powerful and palpable feeling that you get. And so I felt this in this dream. Maybe not as intense as the first time perhaps, but it was definitely there. So I think that's very interesting that this feeling arises when we get physically close to each other. My instinct tells me it's an experience he wanted to show and have with me, and I am a willing participant, and so he did. I felt rather passive in the dream, like I just found myself in this self-contained, realistic environment. It seemed like Mike had maybe created this environment for me, and I can imagine him doing this. In the astral, this is something that he could conceivably do. He could think this environment into existence. And I mean, it just makes me think of another dream that I had in kind of recent times. There was another dream with Mike, and we were in this room, and the surrounding area was kind of a dry forest area, and there was a train line going through there, and there was a playground just newly constructed by the train line, and something about kids being able to access the platform in a safer way or something. And I was in the room, and I was with Mike, and I was, you know, just with him, and I was stroking his eyebrows and stuff. And I think I asked him, like, did you build that? Like, did you make that? And he said, yeah. And then I asked him, when did you build it? And he said, last night. So, I mean, it's conceivable that in the astral you could build a playground in one night. So I was just reminded of this other dream in the context of him creating things using his intention. So what are we up to? So it seemed like Mike had maybe created this environment for me, and I can imagine him doing this. I do think the specific act of rubbing our foreheads together is about opening my third eye and deepening our intimacy and love and commitment, which are to do with the present, not the past. It was such a beautiful little dream, a sweet, detailed little vignette of innocence, youth, sharing, tender sensations, and love. Thank you, baby. Thanks, Mike. That's beautiful. Really, really beautiful. Oh, I'm just so excited. I have no idea what he's going to do next, and never know what he's doing. But he's doing something. Can be sure of that. And just as a postscript, the astrologer that I had a reading with mid last year, and that I follow her wonderful forecasting and things, Dr. Ira Kiori. I just the day after I wrote this piece, I happened to check out her forecasting for February, which I'll put the link to below. And she writes, February the 7th and 8th promise romantic excitement as Venus trines Uranus and Mars sextiles Neptune. Venus won't sextile Neptune until the 13th, a good lead up to Valentine's Day, and perhaps a reason to celebrate early. And celebrate early we did, I think. So, I mean, how fitting is that I had this dream on the 8th, or technically between the 7th and the 8th, because I went to sleep on the 7th and woke up on the 8th. And, so that was the beautiful dream that I had just now.